Welcome back. Leaders of the Department of Government Efficiency say they'll apply concepts that have been successful in the private sector to solving federal government challenges. They're the latest in a long line of people to advocate for private sector techniques to use in government. Jeff Bristow is Principal and Government and Public Sector Technology Leader for EY. Jeff, welcome. Thanks for joining me. You told me recently that you haven't seen any challenges that the federal government has that the private sector hasn't tried to address already. What's your sense of the differences between the way the private sector approaches those problems and the way the government does?
It's a great question, and I think twofold. One, it's almost a matter of when, not what. To some extent, a lot of the other sectors, if you think about it, they've already gone through a lot of these. So typically you see a lot more interest and kind of attitude around, let's take a chance, let's figure this out, let's embrace technology early on. So a lot of the concepts are already, they're going to be the same. There are definitely nuances of the government that have to be taken into account when you apply how to solve them. But the what is largely going to be the same. You talk about automation, you talk about artificial intelligence is what everyone wants to talk about right now. A lot of the underlying technology is going to be the same. How the agencies approach it, their willingness to approach it, is going to be maybe what's different, what needs to be figured out. So it's the technology is not in of itself what is going to make or break how you do it. It's really focusing on outcomes. I think that's something that I've seen a tremendous amount of acceptance and reliance now from agencies saying, let's not talk about my requirements, let's talk about what I want to do. I think that's something that's very, very common for private sector agencies to do, private sector entities, because they have motivations around profit, they have motivations around efficiency, and it drives the bottom line. While the federal government may not have that exact same bottom line, they do have very similar core beliefs and capabilities that they need to address. We're constituents. They want to improve outcomes for constituents. They want people to have a better experience. If you think about it, from banking to retail to hospitality, they all have a person at the center, right? As do every government agency. By definition, they're serving constituents. So it's really not about what technology do you use, it's about how do you apply that technology and what questions do you ask to make sure that you're solving the right problems.
So you mentioned hospitality. That's interesting to me because that's one of three private sector sectors that it strikes me people in the federal government talk all the time about, I want to know what's going on in that sector. Hospitality is one, financial services is another, and e-commerce is the third one that comes to mind right off the top of my head. What is driving that hunger, do you think, on the part of government people? Long before DOGE, long before the Biden administration's PMA about customer experience, long before the first Trump administration's PMA regarding services and CX, what's driven that hunger in your mind, and what does it look like today?
I think primarily it's the simple fact that every single constituent, whether they work for the government, whether they're supported by the government, they all have those experiences. So it's been technology has made that a lot more common now. So people say, I want an experience when I'm dealing with the government like this. So now if you look at my children, I have a 14-year-old, 11, and 8-year-old, right? My 8-year-old has very different expectations than I did when I was 8. In no small part because of technology and what the advancements that are now there. They just have a different fundamental experience, and they have an expectation around what they should be getting. So I think the goal of governments of agencies, let's try to figure out how to provide the same kind of experience. Let's create parity between what they do every day when they're not dealing with government and what they're getting from the government. And the closer they can get to that, the higher the utility they're going to get from the agencies that support them, higher customer experience, and ultimately it's going to improve the outcomes for those people, which helps everybody.
We have about a minute left. You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that the government obviously is different than the private sector. What do successful people in government do with private sector ideas to be successful when it comes to integration and implementation of it?
Excellent question. I think part of it, you have to recognize that it's not just about technology. There's a workforce component to this. You have to meet the agencies where they are. The agencies need to understand where they are, not just on the technology front, but also where are the people? Where are the employees right now who serve them? How can we help harmonize that. So you figure out how to adopt that most efficiently given where people are. So that's one big element of it. I think the other thing is just focus on outcomes. Again, and I've seen a huge evolution in my time supporting the government where people stop focusing on there's 3,000 requirements and now it's here are the outcomes I want to achieve, because that enables that enables people to leverage the technology to say, let's create a solution that doesn't replicate what you have today, but it addresses where you want to go tomorrow.
Jeff, thanks very much for joining us. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You can read more on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com.